It's
Hello,
exciting.
everyone. It is very exciting.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of Small Talk. Today, I'm with my friend Maureen, who's from Amsterdam. So, yet again, we have a little continental episode, and Maureen is in Amsterdam. So it is
hmm
4 p.m. right now, 4:20,
Yeah, 420. Yeah.
4:20, and it is
Yes.
10:20 a.m. here in Ottawa. So I'm very excited to have her on board. Today we're going to talk about experiencing the pandemic halfway across the world, amongst other things. So please do like and subscribe if you don't want to miss the next episode. And if you hit the like button, I know which topics that you're enjoying. So it helps us to kind of curate our conversations, and hopefully it also makes the content more visible so that people can find and, find more solace in our conversation, and also share with your friends and family because, we can help as many people as possible with these chill small talks. But without further ado, Maureen, do you want to give a little self intro?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, I'm Maureen. I'm actually not from Amsterdam, from a way smaller town somewhere in the south of the Netherlands. But I've been living here for a while. And I lived in Toronto for a bit. That's where Henkia and I met each other, which is really cool. I'm working in consulting. I just switched jobs in the middle of a pandemic. I started last week, which is super strange to do. So I'm gonna be working on innovation and stuff, which is super cool.
So cool.
Yeah, it's really really cool. I love singing. I always worked as a singer when I was studying. I worked in this restaurant where we were waiters, but we were also singers. So that was super cool. I'm 26 and I am currently living through a pandemic, which is really weird.
I love that last bit. Just makes it way more relatable.
Yeah, it's part of my identity now, you know? It's just gonna be
Completely.
like I was 26 when we were in a pandemic. It's just gonna
Yeah.
be part of the story now.
But yeah, as Maureen said, we met in Toronto, and Maureen was studying as an exchange student, living with our mutual friends, like friends that I had met slash lived with in my first year. And
Yeah.
then, you were their roommate. And I remember them telling me about like this girl exchange student that's gonna live in their apartment in, like, it was in Jose's room, right? Yeah, it was in
Yeah, it
Jose's room.
was.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, and I was like, "Wow, like, are you ready for that?"
They were not ready for
They
that.
were not
They were
ready.
not.
They were not ready for you, let alone being ready for, like, a woman being in that apartment. I feel like we have been able to, like, manage to stay close throughout all this time because of, I don't know, like, we share not just, like, similar sort of values or things like that, but I feel like it's if for me, I like making foreign friends, and that sounds like weird, like
Mhm.
fetishy, but like because I come from like a foreign country, like had I been a white man,
Yeah.
that'd be fucking weird. But
Yeah. You
you
can
know,
say it. You
I can
can.
say it
Yeah.
exactly. And part of the reason why I loved meeting Lakshan Mo and like even Maria and living with Maria and Primrose and just having all these, Aya from Lebanon and just everyone who's just has these so many diverse cultural backgrounds and learning from that. And you kind of have the shared experience. And I think I kind of fell more into my Korean identity, more so than I had ever before that, because no one was really that curious about it back here. But then when you
Yeah.
go to like a place like Toronto and you meet all these different people from everywhere, they're like, "Oh, you're Korean," like, then you talk about, things about your culture, and they're interested and they're curious, and you're like, "Oh, true. That's like a part of my identity." And I feel like I can really share that openly with these people because I'm curious
Yeah.
about their cultural background. So I don't know. I feel like
Yeah, I
it's,
love that too.
yeah,
Yeah, I love
right?
that too. Yeah, and especially here, I think in the Netherlands, what happens a lot, and I think a lot of people that move here kind of struggle with that because
Mm,
the Dutch friend groups were so closely knit. It's
mm,
that you will have a friend group, you will meet each other when you're 5 years old, and then you
yeah,
all move to Amsterdam, and then everybody moves there, and then
right.
everybody also stays friends together. So the friend groups are a lot less open. So when I moved to Toronto, and everybody, people would literally invite me to parties at Starbucks, which I thought, which for me was such a culture shock, because I was like, that would never, never happen here. That would
Right.
be so, so weird. And then
So
I'd be
weird.
so shocked if someone spoke to me in Dutch. And I was like, hey, do you want to come to a party? I'm like, I'm getting, you're serving me coffee. This is weird. But then in Canada, it was just like, in Toronto, especially, everybody was just like, yeah, come hang out. And like, that's also how I met you. And here, I think it's also less common for, if you meet a friend through other friends, that you would also hang out separately. And then for me, so coming from like a very, very Dutch kind of French group, but then moving abroad and like also seeing like that Dutch part of my identity that was different from other people's identity,
Yeah.
also, yeah, let me explore more what that meant. And
Yeah.
also which parts I wanted to pick from it and which parts I was like, no, we're not going to
Right.
do that. That
Right.
part of being Dutch, we're not going to have in my
Right.
character.
Right.
So that was pretty cool.
What parts of being Dutch are you not down to be embracing?
Dude, I'm gonna get crucified by the Dutch people. I'm gonna be kicked out of the group. No, I think that non-openness to meet new people and to let people into the group, I think that's the part that I really want to let go.
Mm,
It just, the thing where, just a very simple thing of, if you're having dinner with 5 people, it
mm,
would be really weird if I just all of a sudden brought someone new along. People
mm,
would be very like, what?
mm.
We did not discuss this. This was not a bring new people into the circle type thing.
Right.
Um, and that's something that I really don't like,
Right.
because
Right.
it creates this
Exclusivity almost.
exclusivity or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. So I think that is the part that I don't like. And I think this, yeah, and there's a certain part in Dutch identity where everybody thinks that we're super progressive, because we were like the first country to legalize gay marriage and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
people are like, oh, we won the gold medal in like progressiveness, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And now everybody kind of stopped fighting for that. So now we're like
Slowly going.
lagging,
Yeah.
starting to lag more and more and more, and not being progressive at all. And people like still saying the N word and being like, yeah, but it's fine because, my black friend also says it. And I'm like, no. But
Oh
stuff like
shit.
that, where I'm like, we're not progressive at
Right.
all. If this
Right.
is still a culture where where we still have black people, like where we still every year have the discussion,
Right.
is this okay or not? Let's
Right.
not. So I think that's also a part that I've kind of took distance from, where I'm just constantly yelling. It's like, guys, if you want to be progressive, you have
Mm-hmm.
to keep progressing. That's
Mm.
literally what it means. And that's
Mm.
not what we're doing.
That's a good point. Where do you think a lot of like your own personal sort of like confidence and courage and strength in that sense, in choosing to be different, but not for the sake of being different, for the sake of, sticking to your guns in a way, or, choosing to believe what you believe in, regardless of what other people think? Where do you think that comes from? Is it like your upbringing? Is it past relationships? Is it, like books or education in the Netherlands?
I wonder, I think it's a good question. I've never
Mm,
really thought about it.
mm,
But I think part of it comes from my elementary school that was quite um I had philosophy. Like they taught a course in philosophy. I started with that when I was 5. So when I was 5, I remember like the first course that we had, or like I had a school where we didn't have grades. We didn't really have like subjects. So I didn't have like the subject of history. It would all be more project based. So we had like every week we had like 5 hours or something that we would dedicate to our own project, writing
right,
about topics that we could pick ourselves. So that,
right.
because they really wanted to keep you engaged.
Mm.
So they started with like uh, a question when I was 5. They asked us, why is water wet? And we were like, I'm 5. I don't know.
That's
What
so
on earth?
cool.
It's so weird. And it really like I remember it so vividly that I was sitting there and I was like, because at some point we got to the question is like, yeah, but does the feeling of wetness, will that be the same for everyone? Or is it a different feeling, but we just all know to call it the term wet because
Right.
that's what we learned, but do we feel it the same way?
Oh
And
my
I
God,
remember
I'm
being
having
like,
like an existential moment right now. I'm 26 and I'm only just realizing that.
I was 5. I remember just sitting there. We were sitting in a circle, and me just being like, what the
What?
hell
Yeah.
is this? What?
Why are you asking me this?
Yeah, and we were like all like from 5 until 12.
Mm.
We also had like a lot of debates. So we had debates on animal testing and like if it helps humans, is it then moral to do animal testing? Yes or no? So this is all like from the age from 5 to 12. So
Wow.
yeah, which was pretty, I think it works for some kids, and for some kids they really, really they need more structure.
Right.
But for me, it worked really well. So I think that's definitely part of it.
I mean, we always hear in North America about like the more like radical like education systems
Yeah.
in Europe, and it just sounds so like um what do you call it? Experimental, and you might think it's like,
Yeah.
oh, people don't actually, it's just like something that's in theory, they could put in practice, but clearly it works on some people because
Yeah.
you really took that to heart, and now that's something that you grew up being aware of and realizing. And damn, I wish we had
Yeah.
that.
I think it's super cool. I think
Yeah.
if we're talking about education, I think there's so many steps to make. And here too, right? Like we have a system here that when you're 12, you take a test, and then that will determine in what level of high school you will be. So
Oh,
that means, and like if you're in the highest level of high school, you can go to university. If you are in the middle level, you can go to University of Applied Sciences. And if you're in the lowest levels, which has like 4 sub levels within it,
right.
I never like to say highest or lowest, but
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
that already gives like
Like a hierarchy.
evaluation to it,
Yeah, yeah.
a hierarchy, which is so sorry for that. Um, I still haven't learned yet how to describe it otherwise. But it
Right.
basically moves from how they've designed it is moved from an academic level to like a practical level. That's kind
Mm,
of what the levels are. So
mm,
maybe that's the way to describe it.
mm-hmm.
And then, but that means that if you take a test at 12 and you, I don't know, are going through some stuff at home, or your
Right.
parents don't speak Dutch very well,
Right.
any of that that doesn't affect your IQ
Right.
or your ability to learn could mean that you get into a different level. And that might, like, I know of consultancy firms, for example, that say you have to have done the academic level in high school and
Oh.
then university and then your master's. And I have friends that have done like the mid level. They went to
Right.
applied sciences university. They then did a pre-master's and a master's in university,
Right.
but they would still not be granted access to that job because they didn't go to like the academic school in the first place when they were 12, even though they've worked their way
Wow.
up. So that's kind of messed up.
That's messed up. That's setting your life up when you're 12 years old, let alone when we're here and we're graduating high school at like what, 17, 16. You're like, I'm not ready to make
Exactly.
decisions about the rest of my life. I don't know how my grades are going to
No.
affect, and that seems crazy at that age. So being set at your
Yeah.
entire life, your future at 12 years old during a major like puberty stage for a lot of kids is
Exactly.
wow.
I've read a lot about imposter syndrome and stuff because I struggle with
Yeah.
that still every single goddamn day.
That's crazy because you are just so like, I've always seen you as like one of the smartest people I know and also one of the most confident people I know. When you're confident and you're smart, it's like top of.
Yeah, but that is
Right.
also a lot of outside. Like I've worked with like a job coach the past year because I had nothing to do and I was like really stuck in me like, okay, where do I want my career to go? Is this what I
Yeah.
want to do? And so I worked with a job coach and I found out that I have a lot of issues. Probably,
Okay.
yeah, no, but and that's funny because I also try to be very open about that when people say like, oh, you always seem so confident. And for me, there's a lot of like pleasing others and stuff that really comes very natural to me.
Mm,
And that I really, as I said, like I'm looking for a lot of validation.
yeah.
So it's also sometimes like a very big front or a very big
Mm,
mask that I put on just to get that validation. So
mm,
yeah, I think that's where it's kind of like masked confidence to just get validation, which is the exact opposite of being
right.
confident. So
Right.
I described it to my coach as being like, when you like, it's gonna sound very morbid, but when like
It's okay.
when there's like in like cartoons or something, if somebody got murdered, they would draw the lines around the person,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I've always kind of like I described it to him like sometimes I feel like I'm just portraying the lines. So I'm portraying the confidence, but I
Mm,
don't have the color to fill it in. Like I don't have the
mm,
substance behind it because I don't feel it myself. I just portray it.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so I've been kind of trying to been working on filling actually up those lines
yeah,
and making it real,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
fact. So I think it's also a nice example of how somebody looks on the outside is very often not what is going on beneath those
Completely.
layers. When I was reading about imposter syndrome, they said make a list, very factual, of what you've done
Mm,
without putting any statement of pride or any statement of
like judging.
non-pride,
Yeah,
judging,
yeah,
like nothing. Just write it down. What have you done? And look at that list. What does it make you feel? And very
mm,
often it will make you feel like, whoa, okay,
mm,
I did
mm-hmm,
some things.
mm-hmm.
And then I kind of use that list to kind of make it a brand of like, okay, how can I use this? And
Yeah,
how can I strategically brand this to make myself sound interesting? It doesn't have to be that I completely agree that that is interesting
yeah,
or that I think that I am, because I still have to think that that is interesting, the brand, but it doesn't mean that I have to think that I myself am interesting. And
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
difference that very much helped me to kind of detach those two
Oh, completely.
from,
I know exactly what you're
one
talking about.
unconfident person to another. Yeah.
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 Listen, I get that too because, and this is the funny thing. It's like you are on the receiving end. Like I'm on the receiving end of people telling me how confident I am and how strong I am and how presentable you are and blah, 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 blah. And oftentimes it sounds like I didn't do the work behind it to get there or that I'm not
Mhm.
trying every fucking minute to come off that way. Because it sounds like it's so
Exactly.
natural, right? But like,
Yeah, because
some
I always have that feeling with you where I'm like, Jesus, all right, okay. Gotta put on my best jacket today. Gotta look, and then you stroll out and you look all effortless. And I'm just there and I'm like, oh my God, I spent an hour thinking what fucking pair of earrings I should match with it. And you just come out with that tattoo and looking
Oh my
effortlessly fine.
God. See, this is the thing. This is the thing. It's
So
like,
stupid.
and you don't know that I spent probably the entire day trying to figure out what I should wear in order to look up good to you. And it's just this constant, like,
Oh my God. I wonder whether this is like a female thing where we're so used to being
oh,
like pitted
totally,
against each other. It has to be.
totally, totally.
Oh
And
my God.
it all
So
comes
gross.
from the whole, like, and this is kind of diverting from our topic, but like women putting other women down. It's not, we're not putting each other
Yeah.
down, but like the need to kind of impress other women in a way, I think comes from the male gaze because we're so used to having to impress based on somebody else's gaze that we are not aware of and we have no idea.
Yeah.
And so for some reason, because that's so ingrained in our minds, we end up doing that to our friends, our female friends that we think are cool and that we want them to like us in the similar way that we want men to like us.
It's so dumb. And I wonder
So dumb.
whether because we're we're so focused now on like, or at least I am, of trying not to see myself through the male gaze. Like
Yeah.
I've been trying to do that. And I do not succeed very often because if there is a man walking, I'll do this.
Yeah.
You know? It's just so ridiculous.
I
But
struggle so much with it. Yeah.
it's so difficult, but because I'm aware of that and I try to not do that, I think maybe that also has enhanced um, my need for other women to like me, because I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, well, I'm not getting it there, but I've
Yeah.
been so indoctrinated with needing validation that I'll then just look for it from my girlfriends,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is ri-
It's just
it's
weird.
ridiculous.
It's
Can
ridiculous.
we just
Yeah. It's
can we
crazy.
just relax? And I like Etienne said this thing the other day where I've just been looking on the street, and it's really true. And he, because I can be like in the closet for a very long time. And this was, I think, after I bought new jeans, but they were vintage, so there was like little holes in them. So I
Mm,
couldn't wear them, but I felt so confident in those new jeans, so I had to
mm,
wear something else.
mm,
And I was just like trying on different things. And he said something along the lines of, as long as you're still trying to wear the clothes, it's never going to look good until you decide that you are the one,
mm.
that you are the one that wear the clothes, and the clothes don't wear you.
Oh, oh
And
my God.
it's so he is a
Wow.
gem that I found on
Wow.
Tinder.
Not sponsored.
Exactly, not sponsored, but it works.
Oh my God. I love that.
But and then I was looking on the street, and I was like, because I was standing, because I was off on Monday to Wednesday, and it was pretty much summer here. And I was just looking around, and I was like, I saw people that wore like the most terrible outfits, but they were wearing them. And then I saw people
Ah,
that wore like the fashionable, trendy things, but those clothes were wearing them. And it's
ah.
such a difference.
Wow. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that.
And that
Like,
just shows that if you stop trying to get validation from outside, and you try to get that confidence from the inside,
yeah.
it shows so much.
Yeah.
I try to be very conscious about what I buy for the environment and stuff. And I don't eat meat, stuff like that. But then when I see all of these pictures with like these trendy clothes, and I feel super untrendy, and I feel
Mm.
old because all these
Mm.
young kids are super trendy, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm old and not trendy and gross. And then I get like this incentive of like, make yourself feel better, buy all the trendy stuff.
Yes.
I just wonder, like, I try to be as conscious as I can, and there's a long way to go. I still consume way too much.
Mm.
um, but if I already have that strong sense in my head of like, buy it, it will make you look cool. It will make you, I don't know, not be old. How does that happen to people that are not thinking on the environmental side at
Oh,
all?
completely. Completely. That's
Well, there's,
why this exists, right? That's why the
yeah,
fast fashion cycles are getting faster and faster. And that's why designers are quitting major houses because they can't keep up.
the difficult part about that is that I notice people are getting tired, if that makes sense. And like,
Yeah. Of the
I notice that
wokeness.
people, of the wokeness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
On the one hand I get, and on the other hand I'm like, yeah, but it's, see it not as you being criticized for saying something or doing something. See it as, again, learning how to be a better human, and see it as a continuous process. Because I
Yeah.
feel like people see that process as a beginning and an end.
I think people are now also grouping everything under wokeness or being woke. It's created a face of its own where it's not, you know, we're not being woke. We're just educating ourselves. We're in a time in history where we have to. It's a responsibility that we've all really just lacked on so much over time. This should have happened
Exactly.
centuries ago, but it didn't. And now we're seeing those adverse effects of it. So when you see that, are you going to just sit still and let that happen and get worse and worse, you know, years and decades down the road? Or are you going to do something about it? And so people who
Yeah,
want to do something about it, or who want to teach other people, or want to educate ourselves about it and do the learning that we should have done years ago, then there's nothing wrong with that person. They're not woke. They're just catching up on all the stuff that we should have learned and we should have been aware of,
exactly.
and we should have had these conversations years ago. You know, I want to say like, um, you know, when Black Lives Matter picked up again last summer, it's not because Black people were hurting now. They've been hurting. They've had this hurt and this pain since fucking slavery time, you know? Like
Yeah,
it's not about, oh, it's a knowing thing now. No, it's been like that. Same thing for Asian immigrants and Asian communities and the diaspora. It's like we're not just upset now. We're not just like, oh, now you're realizing your race. No, I've been recognizing my race ever since I've been here and I saw people that didn't look like me. But I never said
Yeah.
anything about it because I didn't realize it was something I could talk about. And I didn't even know the right words to use. And I didn't even know what this emotion I was feeling was called.
I've had this conversation with my brother who's less open than I
Mm,
am.
mm,
And he, at some point, he said, like, yeah, I have a real problem with being called a racist if my opinion differs.
mm.
And I said to him, I said, well, first of all, I think very often you being classified as a racist is more the notion that you're not open to listen to other
Mm,
people's experiences.
mm.
So it is about your behavior. It's not that
Yeah,
your behavior is intentionally bad,
yeah,
but it is that your behavior is lacking a certain characteristic, and that
yeah,
characteristic is listening.
yeah,
And I think that's what often people forget, is that either you are this or you are not.
yeah.
And in my lifetime, I've made many, many problematic remarks.
Yeah,
I'm
same.
trying to grow from them
Yeah,
and like learning what is hurtful to say. It's also not what you cannot say. It's
yeah,
still free speech. And I
yeah,
believe in that, but it's you choose not to say it
yeah, yeah,
because you respect other people.
yeah.
And that's a completely different nuance where people are like, oh, I can't say that anymore. And I always, like, my mom used the term dark the other day because in Dutch language, it's also saying that someone is black, for example, has always in language, that word has been actually more negative
Oh, okay.
than many other words.
Okay,
So
yeah.
people are still trying
Interesting.
to, like, the language hasn't evolved so much, but
Right.
now black also in Dutch is a term to use.
Mm.
But I also struggled with that because I always learned not to ever say that word because it
Mhm.
sounded so harsh, which
Mhm.
in itself is problematic.
Mhm.
So if you unpack that further,
Mhm.
but then I was explaining it to my mom, and she said she used the word dark, and I was explaining to her why that is a problematic thing to use. And I said, Mom, you can still choose to use that word, but I hope that now, after I've explained to you why it's hurtful,
Mhm.
you choose not to. Then she
Mm.
was like, oh, that's a really nice way of looking at it.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, I thought it was kind of like rules. I was like, no, there's
Yeah.
no rules to it. You just choose to be nice to people.
Yes. Yes.
That's all it is.
That's
Let's
all
not,
it is. Yeah. I
and then
couldn't
there
agree
is no
more.
rules.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You're not restricted. You just choose to be a better person. You just choose to be a nicer person. But at the same time, imagine that type of person multiplied by the millions. And that's the scary part, right? Because you see
Yeah, it
one
is.
person at the grocery store who's refusing to wear a mask or is yelling racial slurs at somebody, and you might think, "Ugh, some crazy bitch or some crazy asshole, like whatever, you know
Yeah.
it's just one psycho. But the scary thing is that that person feels comfortable and safe enough to say those things because of the society that they think allows them to do that. And
Yeah.
that happens, and they have those thoughts because of how many other people also think that way. That's the scary part, right? And like,
That's true.
yeah, a lot of times when it happens, and I am guilty of this because I saw, I'll do a quick story time, but like basically when I was still in Toronto and I was grocery store, I was shopping for groceries.
I was grocery storing.
I was grocery storing, but not at a grocery store. I was at the market and I was like waiting in line for like one of their pea meal bacon sandwiches or something because it was so fucking good. So I'm in line and down, down the sort of aisle, and I see this black man get yelled at racial slurs by this old white homeless guy. And he was just like going off at this one guy. And I was just like, what the fuck is happening right now? Like, is this really happening? This is during like the height of, the Black Lives Matter movement picking back up. And I was so in shock that I was like, is anyone else seeing this? It's like, is everyone else seeing what's happening? Because no one was doing anything.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing anything either. But then the worst part was not just this old, crazy guy going off on this one guy, but it was the store owner and across from, the old guy who told the black guy to calm down. And he was walking him away from the situation. And I was like, what? I was like, wait, what? And I was like, literally, like my body did this, like, should I like go? Like,
Yeah,
what should I do? In the back of my mind, I'm like, if I go and I do something, or if I stand up, I'm going to make a bigger scene, because maybe it's not big enough of a scene yet. And that's why no one's doing anything. Because I had convinced myself that it wasn't because everyone here chooses to be a bystander. It's because everyone here realizes they're just going to make it a worse situation.
they made a rational decision. Yeah.
Yeah. And while that was happening, he walked away. And so I'm like, okay, well, now the situation's like over. I grab my sandwich and I'm walking out, and I go to like Loblaws across the street to get the rest of my stuff. And the entire time I was walking around in the Loblaws, it was just filled with regret and guilt the entire time I was there. Like, what if that guy goes home, and what if that was the last straw for him? And what if he had had enough? And what if he does something tonight that's like horrible? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know who he is. I don't know what his story is. What if he chooses to take that to heart, and, what if that affects him for the rest of his life? I don't know how old he is. Like, that just like kept bothering me, and that made me realize, like, I really can't not do anything anymore when I see something like that happen, because I can't live with the regret and the guilt.
Yeah.
And that's a privilege that I have, being able to feel, that's the worst. That was the hard part. This whole bystander effect, it's so dangerous.
It is.
That it's not even about like, what are my ideologies or what are my values and on free speech and whatnot. It's just about, I don't care about those other people that was like harming that guy or attacking him. I just care about that one guy, because now that's just not okay. And that's it.
It never is.
It's never,
and
yeah.
That's the thing. That's where my fairy tale view of, if we just educate enough people, it will all be fine, is where it goes wrong. Is that if, like, enough's enough.
Yeah.
At some point, and I think that fairy tale view, first of all, is not going to work because of that power or proximity to power that white men and white women feel.
Yeah.
Because let's not exclude white women from this narration.
Yeah.
It boggles my mind that there's people choosing the side where they will, especially with white women. I don't understand how you can choose the side that will always kind of put you down.
Yep.
Because you are also being discriminated against, repressed in so many ways.
Yeah.
So it's just use that proximity to power to make a change.
Exactly.
Like I feel like that's the group.
But then there's so many white women, like, I don't even want to bring up the whole JK Rowling thing, but like, who, are against trans rights. And it's just like, it goes so beyond just being, I'm a woman, therefore I believe in feminism. It's you need to recognize the intersectionality. Intersectionality is everything right now. And if you can't see that, I don't know what to.
But I think there's in that intersectionality, I think there's two parts to that. I think the first is, and this is going to sound very harsh, but it's difficult if you have always narrated yourself as the victim and fighting for your equal rights,
right,
to then recognize yourself as someone who has more privilege than the other, and to be part of a group, racial group, that has actively played a part in oppressing others. So I think that is, for a lot of people, and I found that hard to do too. It's not fun. That feels, obviously, then you feel like a victim, which, for a lot of people, I think is a position that feels, I wouldn't say good, but it's a position where you are willing to fight for your rights, and you can feel a little bit sorry for yourself too.
Yet at the same time, it's like, is it that hard to fathom that you are not the only victim in the world?
Exactly. And there you come back to kind of like a selfishness and a self-absorbedness of a
Yeah.
lot of people
Do you
being
think
like, yeah, but I have it really hard. And
do you think
it's,
white women
it's,
sort of like pride off of some white women pride off of that victimization? I know that that
yeah,
sounds horrible
100%.
to say, but yeah, okay. That's
A
what I
hundred
yeah.
percent. And I will, I will take it upon myself to also realize that in myself, I have that sometimes in
Mm,
discussion, talking about race,
mm,
or talking about sexuality and how people are discriminated against, I will bring up the fact that, oh yeah, I also sometimes get discriminated because I'm a woman. So I
mhm,
know the feeling.
mm.
And I have done that before. And like I have learned to kind of completely dim that out because it's a completely different scale.
Mm, mhm.
Doesn't mean that it negates my experiences,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
um, but I do think that a lot of women do kind of, yeah, not I want to say get off on the victimization, but that
Yeah,
sounds a little
yeah.
bit fascistic, but are very comfortable in that role of
Yeah.
victimization, and it's hard to get out of that.
It's so complex. And with
Yeah.
everything that's come to light, in the recent times, everything connects, everything crosses, um, everything is related to everything. And I totally agree with what you're saying. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's so
And
many
it's scary
different
to talk
groups.
about, right?
It
Like
is.
I'm even still not scared talking about it, but I am very aware that, as I said, I'm still learning. So there might be things that I'm saying that are insensitive or that might not be fully educated or might not be, I don't know, might be, as I said, like my vision sometimes is too much of a fairy tale because I have all the privilege surrounding me. So it's very easy to say, like, if everybody just was a little bit nicer to each other, it's very easy to say when, you don't have to fear for your life, literally. Um, so it's I think it's also like for me having this talk and knowing it's recorded and it's going to end up on the internet is kind of scary. But it's
No,
also that's also something that we I think need to break is make it okay to talk about it.
I want to say that, like, everything that you're saying, your vulnerability is your strength. And I think it's translating. It'll resonate with anyone who watches this who identifies as a white person. And it's you would think that after all this time, after everything that's happened in the last few years, everything that's come to light, that, as a person of color, when you bring certain topics up, or as a woman or female person of color, bringing things up in conversation amongst white people, that people will say things like that first to you, will say, yeah, like, to educate yourself and the things that you're going through, and recognizing that first before myself having to bring that stuff up. But a lot
Yeah.
of it's still not happening. And I'm not expecting every conversation to roll the same way, right? Everyone is, like you said, everyone is still learning, and they're going through that. Well, I'm hoping the people are, you know, in my life at least, are learning or educating themselves. And maybe they haven't found the courage to at least bring those things up, or they don't really know how to navigate those kinds of conversations with now recognizing that me as their friend who's a person of color, because that's also something I didn't recognize myself for a long
Yeah.
time, just because I didn't think I was allowed to, or that there was any space for that. But the fact that you're even bringing these things up, people around you are, like you said, you're having that conversation with your mom is not going to be aware of those things. And hopefully those small changes do affect people. It does create change. It's the smaller conversations, it's the little corrections. Your coworkers hopefully are going to go home now and think, okay, well, I heard this from my friend at work the other day, did you know so and so? Or like, now that when their friends say it, you're like, I probably wouldn't say that. I heard from a friend of
Yeah.
mine, it's probably not cool to say those things. Those things, they make change. Not just that, but just across everything. How have you grown during the pandemic, and sort of what things have you been realizing or reflecting on, outside of some of those other things that we talked about?
I've realized, as I said, I've realized I have a lot of issues, which is a
Mm,
good thing. Um, but for example, like I grew up with my brother has Asperger's.
Okay.
And he only had like a mild form, so that means that now he like functions completely like within, you know, the standards of society, because
Mm.
I think everybody functions normally in
Yeah.
their own way. But when he was a kid, he would go berserk. He would
Mm.
have the craziest um, anger attacks. Like
Mm.
because of, if for example, like the break in school would start 5 minutes later, he
Mm.
would lose it completely,
Mm.
because Asperger's is very much about structure,
Right.
and also not fully being able to empathize a
Right.
lot.
Right.
So he would like, he has thrown chairs through like windows in elementary school and stuff. So like those kind of like attacks. So I've learned a lot about how that has affected me, and how
Mm.
that has kind of made me into a person who always wants to be perfect,
Mm.
not stand in anybody's way,
Mm.
avoid any type of conflict. I
Mhm.
avoid every single argument. I will always say I'm sorry for
Mm.
everything, even though I know I shouldn't be sorry, but I'll be like, I'm sorry. I just don't want to enter into conflict.
Right.
Yeah, which is a crazy realization, because I
Yeah.
never really knew where I was coming from. And a psychologist I was talking to trauma, and in my head, I'm like, this is not trauma. I grew up in a really
Mhm.
nice house with loving parents. My brother and I have a really good bond together. Like he never touched me or anything. I don't
Yeah.
have trauma.
Yeah.
Nothing bad happened to me.
Yeah.
And she also said, she was like, yeah, but you were 3 years old and your brother was biting and scratching other kids in school. Like
Yeah.
my friend's brother still has like the
Marks?
markings from my brother
Wow.
biting or scratching him.
Wow.
Um, so she said, like, you as a kid never fully felt safe in that environment. And that is, you cannot like realize now how much it will probably affect you, because you were 3 years old. So
Yeah.
you were just on like autopilot, like
Yep.
human autopilot.
Yep.
Um, so it's like, for me, it's a big learning to learn now how to talk about it, be open about it, and
Yeah.
be also, because I don't want to make my brother seem like an asshole, or like my parents
Yeah.
for not like being there for me or whatever, because I
Right.
have the nicest family, you know?
Right.
But just the fact of also taking up the space and being like, hey, this is what has made me me, and this is why I struggle with certain things.
Yeah.
To be able to take up that space and be more open about that, and not care as much about, okay, what will people think about my brother? It's like, that's, first of all, there are people that don't know my brother,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
What matters is taking up space and like allowing yourself to feel this, and that
Mhm.
that's okay, and that trauma has many different facets. And I'm still not comfortable calling it trauma, because for me, I'm just like, it's just
Mm.
something that happened. I feel
Mm.
like there is, on that scale, there is people with like extremely traumatic experiences that I don't even want to, you know, touch with my extremely
Mm.
privileged white ass, you know.
I'm also
Yeah.
learning that from other friends of mine that they're very reluctant to call certain things trauma for fear
Yeah.
of same thing, for fear of not painting this like negative or demonized picture of their parents or their growing up or their the environment in which they grew up in, or recognizing the privilege that they have, and therefore they don't want to call it
Yeah.
trauma. But I'm also learning because, not to take away from your story, but like, I was telling you like during quarantine before off camera that like, yeah, I've been going through some things and, started therapy again. And part of that
Yeah.
therapy was me recognizing the trauma that I had experienced as well. And like, I never really saw it for what it was. I never really properly dealt with it. I never called it trauma. And I
Yeah.
chose not to call it trauma because for fear of making it um, worse at a time where I was just ignoring it and I was putting it in the back of my mind. But
Mhm.
now growing up, having had some distance from it, from that experience, calling it trauma has allowed me to see trauma for what trauma is. And that's just something that happens to you at a very young age where you're not meant to experience something like that, or where you don't have the
Yeah.
emotions, you don't have the capabilities, the understanding, the brain, mechanisms to be able to understand what that is and how that affects you and be able to cope with it.
Even after like having a really good explanation, I would still not be comfortable. So
Yeah.
that's still something I'm working on.
Yeah.
But I think that's why I'm grateful for the pause. That I was going to say I'm grateful for the pandemic, which I'm not, but I'm, because it
I
cost
know
a lot of
exactly.
lives. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm grateful for the pause that it granted
Yeah.
me. And work was still going on, and that's something like completely separate, where work going on in like still high speed train is a really weird experience when the
Yeah.
rest of the world stops or something. It's really
Agree.
strange. We
So
talked about
weird.
this before, like employers now all of a sudden expecting more
Yeah.
productivity, but that's like completely when everybody now is kind of just tired and is like, guys, I cannot be productive. My brain is filled with space. I'm
And so many people
dead.
are re-experiencing so many of their own past traumas or whatever it is, like past things that they had bottled up and never really dealt with. And now everyone's given this the entire year of pause of no one else but your own thoughts. It's
Yeah,
bound to create, I mean, we're going through a mental health crisis across the world, and people are going through that. And the fact that companies and businesses are completely deciding to close their eyes to it and saying, okay, yeah, that's fair, that's happening, but business as usual. And it's like,
exactly.
it's just not
Where
how we
indeed
work.
everybody is, I feel like a lot of my friends and a lot of people around me have taken this pause and have started reflecting and unpacking things that they haven't done for a while. You going
Completely.
back to therapy. I really need to reach out to my GP to start doing sessions with psychologists as well.
Hmm.
But there is no appreciation indeed from like businesses of like what that does to people's mental state. But what I also feel like now for me is that I've done all of this unpacking and
Hmm.
all of this reflection and all of this thing. And now a year later, I'm also kind of ready to kind of start implementing everything that I've learned.
Mm.
But I kind of feel like now, and I'm still trying to, I really want to like explore that further, is this the point where I'm supposed to start implementing it because I feel like I'm kind of done unpacking things? Or is this
Mm.
actually the moment where I should go deeper?
Mm.
And this is the moment that that humans never really get to because we're way too busy.
Yeah.
Because if you have a burnout or something, you will just, the moment where you feel like I can start working again, you'll do that.
Yeah.
Or is that the moment where you should give yourself one more month to see if there is any underlying issues? Why you got the burnout in the first place?
It's a great
Stuff like
question.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really wonder. And I thought things would be opening back up here um, quite soon, but they are not. We're still having a curfew here and everything.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's still we're still in full lockdown, even though a lot of people are, I think, getting mentally very tired from like the drained social contact. So the parks here are completely full, and they kind of fucked up with the vaccination program as well.
I was gonna ask
They
you about
didn't
that. How is that over there?
they didn't really mess up, I think, but they just had a different approach. It's difficult with the EU, right? Like there's many
Oh.
countries in the EU, and I think this has also laid bare a lot of the problems that are there with the EU is that it's not a unity. And
Mm.
it's called a union, but it doesn't really feel like a union. It feels just like a collection of countries that
Right.
also all secretly kind of hate each other. So it's just,
Right.
it feels like a family dinner where everybody is kind of like on the spectrum of political beliefs. There's also countries like the Netherlands who are just fucking cheap. They just want to get the best
Mm.
price. So
Mm.
then you have like this infighting in the back, and then you have people that are just like, we want to get it for the best price. And then
Mm.
obviously you're going to be too late. And
Mm.
then they stopped vaccinating with AstraZeneca again here because
Wow.
apparently like the risk for blood clots is too high, which is hilarious because I don't know if you've ever seen the risk for blood clots in the pill anticonception for women,
No. Oh,
but
I don't
it's
take
very
them.
high. No,
Really?
it's very, very high. Like, I don't know what the new research is on the vaccine, but like the latest I heard was that the risk for the pill was much, 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 much higher for the vaccine. But, now we're also giving them to men. So now,
Oh,
now
oh, that's when it matters. That's when it
that's when it
matters.
matters. And now it's not, now it's not a choice, because now you want people to be vaccinated and like against, but not having children and still being able to have sex, that is a choice. So then you should take the risk.
Wow, that should be its own episode. Holy shit. You were talking about like back to work shock. What did you mean by that? Like the sleep thing or just like other stuff?
Just other stuff. I think I was in the office on Thursday for the first time in a while. And this is also like my new job, so everything was new. But I was there for my onboarding, and their office is completely closed, but just a couple of people came in to do my onboarding.
Okay, yeah.
And it was just so weird to sit in a meeting room with people, and like the energy that you have when you're actually in a room with people is very different than when you're in front of a screen. Like I feel like I'm going to be terrified presenting in front of a room of people again, because it's so much less scary. Yeah, I feel like it's so much less scary when you're just behind a computer screen.
Right.
And if something goes wrong, you can just click it away and just pretend like it's not there.
Right.
But if something goes wrong and you're there, you cannot just click to leave the meeting.
Right.
You gotta leave, like pick up your stuff. And it's not that I'm always assuming that everything's gonna go wrong, but the energy is very different when you're in a room with people.
Yeah.
I also have to get used to how I talk to people that I don't know.
Yeah.
Like how do I meeting new people is a skill that I'm rusty.
That's like making me think about, yeah, because like apart from like going to the grocery store, but that's different, right? Like you're talking about people that you don't know that matter how they see you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's I don't even want to think about that. I feel like a lot of people are gonna have some anxiety going back in.
But also, what I already noticed now is, now that people are kind of letting go of being a little bit more careful, people are starting to try and plan my weekends. Like they're asking me what I'm doing in 3 weeks and if I can hang out on Saturday. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. I'm not doing that again, ever. I don't want to plan, and maybe that's a very, very Dutch thing to do. It's like I would have had weekends before COVID, like 5 weekends. I would exactly know what I'm gonna do.
Right.
I would have coffee at 1 or breakfast at 10, coffee at 1, go for a run, have drinks at 5 and dinner at 7, and then go out. I cannot handle that.
That's a packed day.
Yeah, I never could handle that, but I'm not going back to that shit.
Yeah.
And I slightly notice people. So whenever people are saying like, oh, I'm going to keep working from home, and I'm going to keep my schedule flexible and stuff like that, I just noticed that people are already going back to the way it was, which was, I think, unhealthy in the first place. But because people are so excited to go back to doing things that for them are normal, I don't think we shouldn't go back to the old. We should take what we've learned from this and like integrate it and make something new. Some people are like, oh, we're going back to what we used to do. It's like, no, let's not do that.
Let's not do that because it wasn't working.
Everybody was on the verge of a burnout or was in a burnout. Like, let's just fucking.
Like we thought that we convinced ourselves that that was our relaxing time, that was our time to let go. But we weren't really relaxing. We were then again put back into just a different style of overexertion of like, okay, where are we going next? What are we doing? I have to go get ready. I have to go drink a shit ton of alcohol so that I'm ready to party. Like in what world does that sound like relaxation?
But I've noticed that because I am an extrovert, I have also assumed always that I always need people around me. And I actually need time to kind of deflate.
Yes.
And like give my brain a chance to rest.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I only think when I talk to people, which is weird, but I have to say my thoughts out loud, and that's how I work through them.
Yeah.
But then when I'm alone, I get the chance to fully just breathe out.
Yeah.
When I'm with people, I feel like I'm continuously breathing in.
Yeah.
And then when I'm alone, I get to breathe out, which is a really nice feeling.
Yeah. It's the understatement of the fucking century. But we're going through a time right now.
We're going through a time. Yeah.
We're going through a time. Yeah. But there's so much to be excited about for the future. And hopefully that is not that carries with it though all the things that we've learned and all the things we've seen. I have one last question, and that is, where would you be right now doing what if the pandemic didn't exist?
I would, wait, what would I be doing? There's so many things I want to do.
But
I
maybe
think I don't
as
even
the
want
person
to.
that you are now, you know?
Ah, well, first of all, I would be nailing it at my new job.
Yes.
Smashing everyone with bold fashion statements in a boring consultancy job.
Oh,
First
I
of
love
all,
that.
being unapologetically myself while
Yes.
being fucking great at my job. I'm not gonna
Yes.
apologize for that shit
No, that
anymore.
really describes you though, honestly, fully. Like you surprise people fully in that sense, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I like doing that. And
Yeah.
yeah, I've noticed that I actually like that position of being the weird one. And I draw a lot of power from it. And I'm still learning to embrace it fully. But maybe, yeah, maybe that's just where it is.
I love that.
It's not something crazy, but I would be there, wearing the clothes, not letting
Yeah.
the clothes wear me,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
just knowing that I'm good at what I do.
Yeah. I
I
love
think
that.
that's what it is.
So true. Yeah, it's like, yeah, well, you could. I was like, oh, if I ask this question, I wonder if she's gonna say like on a beach, but I'm like, no, Maureen wouldn't say that. I feel like that's just not, it's just not her answer.
That was my first answer. And then I was like, yeah, but I don't want to do something. My life is not only about the beach moments,
Exactly.
and I really want to avoid that part. It has to be in the smaller things,
I love it.
in the things, if you don't enjoy the work that you do 5 days a week.
Yeah. It's
When
the
you have
day
the
to day.
choice to do something that you like,
Yeah.
let's put that
Yeah.
out there.
Well, and even if it's not something you like, you find a way to make it bearable for you, and those small joys make that work, right? And it's like,
Exactly.
and
Or
if
you
it is
decide that
something you
it's
love,
work and
yeah.
then you find the joy somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for being on
Perfect.
here again. And this was so nice. I miss you
I loved it.
so much.
Me
Ugh.
too.
And once this is over,
I'll come soon.
please, please, please do.
I have to visit North America too. I've never met any of Chen's family or friends.
Yes, yes.
So, but then I'll be close to New York, so I'll be close to pop over to Ottawa, I guess. I've never
Yeah.
been. So,
You'll come stay here and it's gonna be good. So there's good things to look forward to. But